Hi guys, me again. So I just wanted to give you one of the fun flows that I did this month, which wasn't really a fun flow, like a flow, but we worked on a lot of balancing poses, and we worked on a lot of different ways to figure out how you're in the proper position for a balancing pose, and just little tips and tricks. So I wanted to give you that here. In case balancing is one of the things that you have an issue with, or is one of the things that you struggle with. So in most balancing poses, you are going to be grounded down on one foot. So really the foundation of that is to get grounded down in that foot. And I know it sounds simple, but it's really not. So what I always like to suggest, let me start with this. A lot of times balancing poses are easier to get off of your mat and do it. So try that next time you're in class, maybe, or at home. Maybe take a step off of your mat and try balancing off of your mat and see if that makes it easy for you. But the other thing is, so I tell people to lift up on their heel and lift their toes up, and then really spread your toes out and then push back down, so that you can feel your whole entire foot pushing into the ground, really rooted down. And then from there, you're just gonna come all the way up the leg. So you're gonna tighten up that kneecap, you're gonna tighten up your thigh. Most of the time, you're gonna have your glute contracted. You wanna pull in on the belly button, pull up on the pelvic floor, and then you kind of go from there. So this standing leg is super, super strong right now, super strengthened with all of that going on. You also you'll notice when you're in a balancing pose that a lot of times your big toe is what starts to lift up. So if you focus on pressing through your big toe, you're gonna have more of that grounding down through your foot. Another thing that you can do that I have them do in class is you can sorry I stepped up. I know I stepped out of the thing. If you have a block, you can practice just standing on the block and grounding down, and even just doing this. You'll notice how much more the standing leg has to really focus and has to really be, everything toned and everything contracting to keep you just balancing like this. So that's another good tip to kind of play around with, seeing how much activation you have to have in this standing leg, is to get on a block and do that. And then for some of the standing poses, like half moon is one that's definitely hard for people. It's hard to get your shoulders and your hips squared open. So one way to really work on half moon is to do it up against the wall, and you can use a block also. So put the block in front of whatever your standing foot is going to be. Find all that grounding down through that foot, through that leg, pull up on everything, bring your hand down to the block, and then open up into the wall and really push this top shoulder and the top hip back. And that way you can see what it's supposed to feel like when you're on your mat and not up against the wall. But you can see what that squaring of the shoulders and the hips, the opening actually of the shoulders and the hips, what that feels like. Because a lot of times when we're on our mat, we're like this, and we're thinking that we have our shoulders stacked and our hips stacked, but we're actually coming forward quite a bit. So to come up against the wall, it helps you to feel that. And again, don't ever be afraid to use a block, especially if that pose, like if half moon is hard for you, definitely take a block, because the block helps you feel what the full expression of the pose is supposed to feel like. So I'd rather people take a block and can get into the full expression of the pose than do not take a block and then have your shoulders falling forward and your hips falling forward. That's not really helping you to progress. You need to use the block first until you can get that stacking of the shoulders and the hips, and then start working with taking the block down to the next lowest and the next lowest, and then maybe you can get rid of it. But definitely use the block at first to let you feel what that full expression of the pose is supposed to feel like. Another trick that you can do for Warrior 3 is you kind of have to figure out how far to get away from the wall. And then you're gonna ground down through that one leg again. And I keep using my right leg just because my left leg is the one that has the issue because of my spine, so it's really hard for me to balance on my left leg, but make sure you do both legs. So you ground down through that one leg, and then you bring, oh, I'm not far enough. You bring your other foot, no, I'm too far, to the wall, and you can press that foot into the wall, and then you can feel what that feels like to have your hips square and have your chest parallel to the floor, and you can feel what that feels like while using the wall to help you balance. And then that helps you when you get away from the wall, you can say, oh wait, I needed to feel this. It also helps you activate that back leg, because a lot of times we just kind of have that back leg hanging around up in there, and that's not helping you with that counterbalance from your chest and your leg. You need to keep the back leg activated in Warrior 3. You really want to tone that thigh, pull up on that kneecap, keep your foot flexed. You can either keep it flexed or pointed, but do something. Don't just have it kind of hanging there. And that's going to help you. That activation is going to help you balance. So that's just 2 poses, kind of little tips. Another thing that I had everybody do was get up on the block and do tree pose. Tree pose tends to be one of the easier balancing poses for people, but when you do it on the block, you really realize like how much you're not activating when you're just standing on the ground. And with tree pose, one of the big things is to make sure that this knee, the knee of the lifted foot is really pushing out to the side. You don't want to be in here, you want to be pushing out. And then what I always do when I come into tree pose, because when you lift this foot up, a lot of times that hip tries to lift up. So as soon as I put my foot wherever I'm going to have it, then I bring my hands to my hips and I bring my hips back down. So you want your hips to be square, you don't want that hip to be up higher. So bring that hip down, really use your heel and push into your muscle and use that muscle to push back. That helps you balance. All of that activation is going to help you balance. And then you just hold it from there. But definitely try to bring the hips back in alignment and bring that knee out to the side, not have it coming forward. So that's half moon, warrior 3, and tree pose. Hopefully that helps you a little.